Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Food for Mzansi's Gather to Grow. My name is Dornumdu. I'm the editor for audience and engagement at Food for Mzansi. And joining me tonight is my awesome farmer co-host, Guguletu Mahlangu. It's great to have you with us here again on Gather to Grow, and so looking forward to an awesome evening of learning and growing together. I can maybe ask our first guest, Easier, to just introduce himself, tell us a little bit about what he does and where he fits into agri. Bertie, welcome to Gather to Grow on Food for Mzansi.
So I'm here on the banks of the Orange River. We do mixed cropping, row crops and mixed animals and veggies and peanuts and wine. So yeah, quite a mixed operation this side.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being here on Gather to Grow. I also have Mpo with us. Mpo, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you fit into the ag base. You do a lot of training, and specifically you're representing tonight sustainable abundance permaculture while we wait for other guests to arrive.
I am co-director of Sustainable Abundance Permaculture. Right now, our focus is training a lot of farmer assistants and support, trying to get people designing and spaces and how to apply appropriate methodologies to a space so that you're farming the best way you can. We work with farmers, we work with urban growers and homeowners and anybody who really wants to get sustainable and do it for the love.
Thanks so much for joining us, Mpo. Guguletu, I've just done introductions with Bertie Kutsia and Mpo as well. So over to you.
Hi, Dawn. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Gather to Grow. Yeah, exciting topic. I don't know if I can start firing away, Dawn, because I'm excited about this one.
Yes, definitely. I think we're expecting Tim Abbott to come. We're still expecting Nelly Komape as well as Mpiwe Sitole, but they will join us. And in the meantime, the floor is yours, Gugu.
I just wanted to fire away maybe at Burti, because I know that he's a regenerative agriculture farmer, that he can maybe explain to us what intercropping actually is.
Yeah, I think you got a nice mix of speakers. I think I will probably just touch on one part of intercropping. In our sense, the intercropping is a lot on the cropping side. So basically it's planting more than one cash crop at once, or some of it might not be a cash crop, but mostly it's more than one cash crop at the same time. For instance, planting maize and soybeans and skipping rows in between, or two rows or whatever. And then we can also do what they call relay cropping, where you plant two different cash crops also in an intercropping style, but different seasons. You literally harvest one of the crops from the top of the other one. I think that's more or less what intercropping means in a row cropping sense.
Thank you so much, Bertie, for your insights. Gugu, I think I'll go over to Mpo now. Mpo, how does intercropping work in sustainable agriculture, or what you practice in terms of permaculture?
Depends on the context of the situation. So like Bertie said, it's a very broad category of intercropping. Can be as simple as mixing two crops or combining trees and herbaceous plants and root crops into what we call a food forest, where you have 7 layers of production. So from the permaculture side of things, we look at what's required by the for the situation, or from the situation, what needs do our clients need to fulfill, and then we design a system around that. Your intercropping will be anything as simple as like the Three Sisters, where we use squash, maize, and corn together, all of them performing multiple functions and working with each other, as opposed to having to put in inputs. And then we yield from that. Can be planting across time so that you have multiple yields staggered across your season, or you can just have the one planting of multiple crops.
Burti, Paul just mentioned so beautifully that, intercropping means multiple crops on our fields. And I just wanted to know how profitable intercropping is. Like, what are the benefits for it when farmers are essentially all about catching the yields? So I'm thinking now we have maize, we have soybeans, and ideally I want to make X amount of tons on my field. So how profitable is intercropping?
That's the crucial question. It's a good place to start. I must say, Mpo really explained it well. From a profitability side, you can't go out measuring yields here. That's the big thing. The challenge is to go out and see how much you can get from 1 hectare per year or per season from different crops, and then obviously how that impacts your soil and inputs. So for instance, if you plant soybeans into maize, your maize crop will probably come down a bit. Might make some of it up with an extra soybean harvest, but you probably won't beat a monocrop corn on yield, maybe on profit, but the positive will probably come in the season after. So let's say the next summer you plant, what we will do is we will do a maize intercrop. Then we will probably come in with a mixed species winter cover crop that we graze down also with a mixed herd of cattle, sheep and goat. And then after that, we'll probably plant pumpkins. And obviously, the pumpkins will do better following the summer of an intercrop maize and soybean than following just monocrop maize. So very difficult to make that sums in a one season. You have to take so many things into account, but yeah, you have to look at the bigger picture over probably 3-4 seasons to really see the gains you get from intercropping.
Thanks so much, Bertie. And if you had to look at the scale on which to do this, is it okay for me to start in my backyard? How do you produce it? Can you do it on a larger scale for people who doesn't know anything about the industry? I think Mpho was highlighting that they help people on different scales as well. So Mpho, do you have some insights on that as well?
The scale kind of determines how you're interplanting, how you go about your interplanting. If you're going for profitability, a small scale operation like the one I manage, the one SA Permaculture manages at RIA, where we're working at maybe 300-400 square meters, can do very intensive intercropping, very fast, what we call successions, where you plant multiple crops across sort of in the same bed, and you actually end up yielding as you're harvesting, you're planting new crops, and as you're building up what we call a succession or a rotation of plants, where you end up with multiple yields from that same bed. So that's how we kind of make up our profit, by really stacking and really packing our plants closely together. Home scale stuff as well. Like I said earlier, you can do that food forest thing where you have multiple things working together in either vertical setting. You have a tree above, an overstory tree above, you have citrus tree beneath it as an understory tree, and you layer downwards. It's almost about filling gaps. So even in your bed at home, you can do a very simple intercropping thing where you benefit two crops together. You can plant your tomato and basil, and they apparently grow well together. You can use onions, for example, to protect your more sensitive crops from pests. You can use onions, spring onions, garlic, and scented herbs. So things like companion planting, plant guilds, as much as they aren't really well tested in the fields, they seem to get results from having onions around our crop, having spring onions around our crops. We have scented herbs in the space, and we've reduced our pest impacts. There's even research that suggests that planting plants like geranium will increase your oil production in your oil crops. There's lots of layers to this. We teach it as a section in one of our courses, so it is pretty complex.
It is pretty complex, but it also sounds, very beneficial. And I think, I really am keen into understanding, why would a farmer just decide to switch over from monocropping to intercropping? Where would we start by needing to crop on our field? Paul?
Starting with intercropping over time. So that switchover, like Bertie said, planting certain crops together benefits that soil, benefits the next generation of plants. You end up reducing input costs, which at the end of the day, that's also a major factor in determining your profit. But a good and simple way to start is just crop rotation, using cover crops, using plants that regenerate the soil after like a heavy eating crop, like, for example, like tomatoes, or a heavy eating crop like squash, or a heavy eating crop like corn. Having beans growing beside them or with them at the same time. Once you till or once you mulch those bean crops back into the soil, you end up putting back a lot of nitrogen. And those kinds of very simple changes where even if you have a single row of a crop, you can edge that row with another crop. As long as you're not really working with machines, then that kind of intercropping works very effectively. And even just that simple edging has a massive beneficial effect long-term on your soil, long-term on your crops. From that rotational planting and from that little bit of edging, you can start learning and figuring out what are the crops that you need to harvest, from those crops that you need to harvest or need to produce, how to intercrop them.
Thank you so much, Mpho. I think this is such a broad topic, and we can obviously discuss it all night. And we have another one of our speakers, Gugu Nelly Komape. Ma Komape, welcome to Gather to Grow. Great to have you with us. We also have another one of our speakers join.
Yeah, thank you so much, team.
Tell us a little bit about what you do. We're discussing intercrop. Each of our speakers had a chance to just tell us a little bit about what they do. We've covered quite a bit, but I know that you also have a lot of experience working with close to 20 schools in the Free State, specifically focusing on this concept. And so I'd love to hear about your work.
I work under the NPO called JET Education Services. I coordinate 20 schools. We were 19, but this year we've added a Parades hostel school because now they have adopted children that used to study in farm schools. So now we have to react a garden for them. So I coordinate their school food. We call it school food nutrition gardens because we realized that our learners, they don't eat the right food. Then we had to integrate teaching together with the garden so that our learners can be able to have a time when teachers are in classroom, they have to use a garden as a learning tool as well. So my job is to coordinate to see that each and every school had a garden, to make sure that they have somebody to assist them with. I had to coordinate stakeholders that like from all different departments so that they can put their head and hands together to make sure that schools have thriving food and nutrition garden. And far from that, I also have a smaller yard at my back because what I teach from school, I cannot just teach them. I had to experience it at my own yard to make sure that when I say do this and if it works, I must first see it in my house as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, May, for joining us. We can't wait to know the benefits of education when it comes to, intercropping skills and soil health and how it's impacted the community as well. Dawn, I see we have Mayor Siphiwe Sithole, who's a farmer and owner of African Marmalade. Mayor, could you please kindly introduce yourself?
I'm Siphiwe Sithole. I am a farmer and the founder of African Marmalade. We grow indigenous crops. We're based in Lizonia, just outside Diepsloot near Lanseria. We do the more what I call unconventional intercropping. People kind of know what to intercrop what with more popular vegetables, but when it comes to the indigenous stuff, they don't know, and we try to make sure people optimally utilizing their space.
Sounds absolutely beautiful. Maybe you can tell us about that part, intercropping indigenous crop. What is understanding that, and how is it different from the work that other farmers do in terms of intercropping?
Well, most farmers will be quite familiar with intercropping what I call the popular vegetables, will be your cabbages, your potatoes, your tomatoes, and onions, and whatever. But people don't know. So if somebody's got limited space and you say to them, oh, okay, they say, okay, I only have got so many square meters. And you say, okay, fine, you can grow 1, 2, 3. But they say my space is too small. And I say to them, okay, so you could actually do, instead of having the 3 sisters, you're going to have the 4 sisters. You're going to do your maize or your sorghum and millet, and that you can actually intercrop with sunflower. So you're going to have the bees coming in and cross-pollination. You're going to put in your spuds, so you're going to put in your pumpkins and your melon and your calabashes, which are going to be creeping all over, then obviously suppressing the weeds, allowing you to retain water. At the same time, you can put in the beans, the cowpeas. You could put in some other different kinds of beans that are quite popular in the African diet. So that's kind of different from what other people know, because they're thinking about the basic, I'm going to do tomatoes go with basil, or I'm going to do, garlic doesn't go together with beans. That's what they know. And some of the intercropping guides that you get, you will not find the African intercropping chart that says to you, this is what you can grow together. I try to encourage that. I also try to experiment. For instance, I would do potatoes in mounds or hips, and I actually then put calabashes, which are going to creep all over and then cover them. Then I don't need to mulch, those heaps, those mountains that I would have done for the potatoes. And I would intercrop sweet potatoes with cowpeas. So I'm able to sell the cowpea leaves. And at the same time, I'm waiting for my sweet potato to get ready. I get my nitrogen fed into that soil, and I have these beautiful tubers of sweet potatoes because of that kind of intercropping.
So beautiful, Ms. Sithole. And I think what you're educating us here is that intercropping gives you more, and I now want to know, does it give you more for less? Because when we're conventionally farming and we're doing our monocrop, we are guaranteed a certain amount of money. So maybe what I'd like to know is just the cost involved of intercropping. Is it cheaper to intercrop, or is it more expensive? Ms. Sithole, you can answer this one.
It's very cheap, because remember, if you've got a couple of square meters, you're going to be able to put in 4 or 3 different types of produce in that particular space. Unlike in monocropping, you're going to say, I've got so many beds, and what I'm going to do on bed number 1, I'm going to put in this, and then another one, I'm going to put in this. Or if I've got a whole hectare. Now, what the problem with the monocropping is that if you're going to do cabbages in 1 hectare, that's all that you have. So it becomes very costly. Right now, we've just been faced by these massive hailstorms that have happened in different parts of the country. Cabbage farmers have lost, where literally an entire field has been destroyed. The cabbages are gone. I've seen farmers advertising and saying, I'm selling a bucket load of my damaged cabbages for 250 rand. I mean, you can imagine the person that calculate they're going to have 25,000 heads of cabbages, which they're going to sell at 10 rands. With intercropping, be it on the indigenous or on the more regular vegetables, is that you've de-risked your business because you have a multiple crop. So you've got crops that are going to grow underground. So you're sitting there, you're having, let's say, your bambara beans and groundnuts. Those are going to grow underground. So when a hailstorm comes, it hits your crops, only the top is going to be affected. You can always rehabilitate those crops. Then you're sitting there, then your sweet potatoes, it's also growing underground. Yes, the leaves will be gone, but then the crops are going to be rehabilitated. You're also providing protection. So if you're sitting with having okra shields some of the crops that you have planted. You have got your maize, or you've got sorghum and millet. Those things are providing the support for your beans. So for me, it just makes so much logic that you actually intercrop. You get more on a limited space, even on a broader space, but you're also able to feed your whole family. You can't feed people on one kind of stuff. So now on a small space, or even on a hectare, I can have literally everything from grains to my beans and greens and all sorts of other stuff.
I mean, to be honest, and the passion is coming through very strongly. Maybe we can talk about some of the equipment that you would need. How does harvesting work when you're intercropping? I'm not sure if Mpho can also share some insight on this. Makumape, maybe you can also share some of your insights.
For our traditional farming, we don't necessarily need those big tractors or those expensive machines that would need to harvest. So as you use your 2 feet, and then you can be able to walk through the spaces. I normally say to the schools, you need to use a very sharp knife that you can be able to harvest your spinach so that you can cut your beans or you don't cut your other crop as well. And the other thing is scissor. We have a special scissor which we can get in most shops where the tools of farming with the schools, because we don't need like hectares and big hectares and hectares. So I believe our spaces are too small, so the 2 feet can be able to walk through, and then it's easy to harvest. Unlike those who are owning farms where they have to use something to harvest. But with me, I didn't experience any expensive tool or I didn't experience any problem where we have to harvest because we have intercropped all our veggies. I think for us at a small scale, it is very easy. And I don't know, maybe someone with the bigger or with many hectares can be able to explain to us how is that working. But at a smaller scale, like our schools, we haven't experienced anything. We don't need any expensive tool. We can always go to the kitchen and find a sharp knife, or we can always have that scissor, which we can even get from Pep Store or from any other store which sells tools for farming.
Thank you so much, Mayor Kompane. I have a question for Burti when it comes to regenerative agriculture. You know, intercropping is basically having different types of plants in your soil, right? And this is all for the benefit of, you know, making money when one crop fails and also for soil health. Now, I just want to maybe speak more about the combinations. You know, the most famous one is the tomato and onions. Lesotho spoke more about intercropping with different indigenous African plants. How do you intercrop with Burti when it comes to agriculture?
Veggies, I'm not going to talk a lot about because it's been spoken about, but on the row crop side, what I like to do is to replace every third maize row. I like to replace with a bean. So I'm going to probably use soybeans this year, but we used cowpeas, we used dolichos beans in the past. Yeah, the idea is to basically you're going to have 2 rows of maize and then the third row you substitute. So basically you let more sun into your rows. So, for instance, let's say instead of 10 tons maize, you're probably going to harvest 8 tons, but with only 2/3 of the stand. And then you're probably going to harvest some soybeans or some cowpeas. And then if you use it for feed, for chickens and so on, obviously it's a ready mix with the protein already added to the maize. If you want to sell it for human consumption, then we clean it afterwards. So then you will have clean maize that we use for polenta and maize meal. And then you can either sell the beans also for human consumption or for planting again. So we mostly keep it for planting again. You can do the same with sunflower and beans. And then another famous one that we're not doing yet, but I did try some of it, is to a relay crop where you plant your wheat in wintertime and then you leave space open to plant soybeans in late spring. Basically, you use the wheat as a cover crop to outcompete all the weeds that you would have had to spray down in your soybeans. The wheat also gives protection for the soybeans in the young stage or when they just start growing. And then you harvest the wheat from top of the soybeans, leaving a dead mulch in the soil for the soybeans to cool down the soil, to preserve water. And also you basically have 2 harvests where if you wait for the wheat to finish before planting the soybeans, the season becomes too short for the beans. So yeah, that's a magic one. Plant our pumpkin rows very wide. So on our maize planter, we'll use every third row for our pumpkins. And that leaves a lot of space for us to get in between. And we like to plant a mix of mustard and black oats for trying to fight against the nematodes, which love to attack the pumpkins. And then the wide rows allows us to get the small tractor inside. Then we can either slash or we can roll down the cover crop, the same manner that you would do with the wheat between the soybeans. But there's a lot of combinations and obviously there's a lot to learn. And every year we try to learn something and to move forward.
Thank you so much, Bertie. And I think a lot of it also has to do with repelling pests, whether you're farming on a larger scale, or even in your backyard on a smaller scale. Maybe I can speak about what happens on a smaller scale. Maybe we can get some more insight in terms of crops that you would plant together on a smaller scale. What works beautifully together, especially when it comes to the crops maturing and harvesting?
A good starting point is a companion planting guide. We usually go with that as the basics, and then what you eat. So you kind of plan your companion planting, you kind of plan your intercropping around what you eat at home. Try to use your vertical space. Another reason the Three Sisters works is because the mealies grow vertically, they grow upwards, and the beans need something to climb on. So instead of putting in bean poles all along your row, you've got mealies that your beans then climb through and help keep stable as well. Because in a storm, for example, your mealies tend to get blown over, but with that web of beans inside that corn row or inside your little corn bed, it's far more stable, it's less likely to be knocked or blown over. Also, your fruit trees. Look at how you look at what you plant your fruit trees with. If you're planting some nice tall fruit trees or some nice shade-producing fruit trees.
Thank you so much, Paul.
But Khomotso, you're a speaker now. You can join in on the conversation.
Hi, guys. I just wanted to find out, is there a intercrop chat that one can find? And if one can advise where to find it?
Well, Komoto, we can assist you on the side. On the other popular vegetables, there are some intercropping guides or charts that you can look at, and most of the time they kind of agree with one another, but somebody says something slightly different. Again, you need to make sure that the intercropping chart you are looking at is obviously for South Africa, so it's listing vegetables that you are familiar with. So you don't take something that come from the US or from the UK, because they're going to be talking about vegetables that we probably don't grow. So we can assist you with both for the common or popular vegetables, as well as guiding you on the indigenous African vegetables.
Thank you so much. I think the important thing about tonight's session is that we're all here to learn and grow together. So feel free to also DM Food for Mzansi, DM any of our participants, connect with them. All of this will also be available on Food for Mzansi post this discussion. Ivor Price, you'd also like to share and join the conversation.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, panel. I'm loving the discussion. I'm not a farmer, but I'm learning a lot. I can see why farmers are choosing intercropping, obviously to improve their output per hectare. I'm hearing a lot of pros of intercropping, increased yields per unit. Somebody even mentioned soil fertility, etc., and reduced weed infestation. I also heard. But I'm wondering, are there any cons? Does this work? Is it suited, for example, to mechanized farming systems or not? Because with every pro comes a con, and maybe the panel can guide us there.
Thank you, Sophie. Ivor, just on the mechanization side, there's a lot of challenges, obviously. If you harvest things together, then there's a lot of challenges getting the harvest right. And obviously getting the cleanness of the seed, if the seeds are different sizes, and also cleaning them or separating them afterwards is also a big challenge. Yeah.
I think for me, what I would identify as a challenge is that in my case, because of how I intercrop, I would not be in a position to use mechanized harvesters, because I would have to harvest each produce separately. So if I'm lifting the pumpkins, I'm taking the other stuff. So I can't use mechanized harvesters in this situation, because then in harvesting, let's say, for instance, the sorghum will actually end up damaging the pumpkins or whatever. So maybe that could be a challenge for other people. It's not a challenge for me. In quantifying what your yield is going to be, what happens is that a lot of people operate in a system where, in the general or way of farming, people are used to saying, I've planted a half a hectare, I'm expecting my yield to be X, Y, Z, because, I know what I've planted. But in a situation where you've intercrop, it might not be that possible to actually calculate to the detail, because you've put in other plants, or maybe you've taken some space because other stuff gets taken by whatever. I just think that it might be a challenge for some to say, okay, so you're going to plant a hectare and you're going to mix all of those things. So what is going to be yield per each kind of a crop? It might not be easy to calculate it to that detail. So that might be an issue for other people.
Thank you so much. I see Makumape's hand is also up, and then we have another person who'd also like to ask a question. Charles is also here. But first, over to you, Makumape.
From the start, one has to know the good companions and the bad companion first. So I think if one can master that from the beginning, I think we can avoid so many mistakes. I think the difficulties will come where one is not even aware that I'm not, like, for example, we know that from what we have learned, you cannot combine your cabbage and your tomatoes and your celery together. Those are the bad companions. Or you cannot put together your tomatoes with runner beans and peppers, because the pesticides from the peppers are going to be on your tomatoes, or they're going to give your tomatoes a very sour taste. So I think the first thing that one has to conquer is to know what fruits or veggies are good for intercrop. I think if we can master that from the beginning, I think the rest will come.
Thank you so much, Ma. I see Paul's hand is also raised, and then I'll go over to Charles.
I'm intercropping two crops, let's say onions and tomatoes, and I have trips, for instance, attacking. What are the other options in making sure that repel the trips from the onion? Because every crop has listed pests that are specific to the crop.
I think he was asking about the specific plants to intercrop with, and then what are the specific pests that will affect certain crops. Is am I understanding that correctly? Paul, would you like to take this one? Bertie is stable. Would you like to take this one?
My knowledge on that is not so great. The more diversity, I think the better it will be for the pests not attacking your crops. But I think Paul might have a better answer there.
I think Makumape, I think your hand is raised.
Charles, it goes back to what I've said before, to say you first need to know which plants are good with each other. I think you need to get, like, there's some boosters or there's some information where they can be able to outline to say which crops are good companions and which one are bad. Like, for example, you cannot mix your onion with tomatoes, for example, as you said, because remember the onion has got a sour taste. So then if you plant it with your tomatoes, then it's going to take out that sweetness of your tomatoes. We need to find something that goes best with tomatoes, like basil, your carrot, and you can do that with tomatoes. I think the best way is to have that calendar that will guide you to say which crops are good with each other.
Thank you so much, Charles. I hope that answers your question. Gugu, do you have anything else from your side?
Yes, I do. So Charles was basically asking about thrips, which is a common pest that attacks the onions. So onions, are used for intercropping because they have that sour taste that repel a lot of insects. And I guess my next question goes to that. How does intercropping play a role in your garden, in your fields, when it comes to IPM, integrated pest management? How do you use intercropping to deter your pests and your diseases?
Yeah, so we do the intercropping mostly on the organic side of our farm. We still have a conventional side also, so it's kind of hard to do a comparison. But in terms of maize, plant GMO free, and we also do organic or both of it at the same time. So we have a lot of issues with stem border, but on the organic fields with the intercropping, we tend to struggle less. And also on the pumpkins, where we struggle with pumpkin fly, especially later in season. When we do use the mustard and we let them go into flower, we attract a lot of bees, predatory bees also. If you keep doing that over time, say you plant 2-3 cash crops together, and the next season you plant 2-3 cover crops together, and you graze it with 2-3 different types of animals, I feel that with time, if you keep the diversity going, your pests will come down, and obviously spending money on fighting the pests will definitely decrease. But I don't think you can pick the fruit of intercropping in one season. I feel that it must be a long-term commitment and just always intercrop every season as much as you can. That's my take on it.
Thanks so much, Bertie. Paul, I think that you also wanted to add something to that question.
Maybe if I could also come in there, from my experience with the schools with regard to pests, I've realized we are using these 3 common that have worked for us. We use the flower called marigold. We're also using the nasturtium. We also use a thyme. So far in schools, we've used those 3, and we've realized that we haven't been experiencing the problem with pests at all. So I don't know, is it because of the schools is not a very huge space or what? I don't know. But I've realized marigold, the thyme, nasturtium, and also calendula, it has worked for us in order to fight the pests because we are not experiencing much up to so far.
Thank you so much. Charles, do you have another question?
You can look for varieties that are more tolerant to the yellow curl virus or more resistant to the yellow curl virus. You can also do the same for other crops. Let's say onion, you can also look for varieties that are more resistant to the viruses that the thrips will cause at the end of the day. And I think when you put everything into the intercrop, you have another level of resistance plus the other complement that comes along with the other plants.
Thanks so much, Charles. I'm not sure if I was the only one who was struggling to hear you, but your insights are valued, and I wish the network was a little bit clearer. Paul, your comment?
We use 3 approaches. It's one, attracting in natural predators, obviously, create habitats. Like we said, we interplant to attract pests or to attract predators of our pests. For example, to have birds over the space. We can also intercrop specifically to repel pests with interplants, like was mentioned earlier, with the calendulas, with gold.
Yeah, hey Gogo, I think we're having there's lots of gremlins and things tonight. But for me, we've covered so much ground, and if there are any vital questions and people would still like to contribute to the conversation, we might need to have a follow-up or even a second session on intercropping if there's more ground to cover. But I think for now, we've covered so much. I just want to thank all of our speakers once again. And maybe to those who are connected and have stable connection, maybe just a last comment about intercropping and what new farmers and people who would like to explore it or transition over should explore or consider.
I would say it's something that people should really look into. There's great benefit into that stuff. It's going to help them in the long run. They might not see the benefits immediately, maybe within the first season, but over time, their soil fertility is going to get better and they'll be able to have better crop management. And there's just so much benefit out of intercropping. It's something that probably we need to be teaching, particularly where the greater part of our country is more urbanized or people are moving more into urban spaces where they have less space to actually grow their own food.
Such a vital tip and important aspect also in terms of agriculture and urbanization and also just how it all looks and comes together. Bertie, would you also like to just share a last comment? Our other speakers have dropped, unfortunately. I see Kumape is still here as well.
I also think it's very important for the future. It's exciting, and I think it keeps the creative juices flowing. And if you look at the cost of fertilizer, the quick rise in the cost of fertilizer, for instance, it's definitely looking into substituting fertilizer with clever intercropping and trying to harvest nitrogen with legumes and loosening it up with deep-rooted crops and radishes and getting your brassicas in to battle nematodes, all that kind of stuff. It's just going to get more and more important moving forward.
Thank you so much, Bertie.
I think we have learned a lot today, and I really agree with the two speakers. We are getting a space where we are losing more space now. So I think, and also on the saving cost as well. I think if everybody would learn to intercrop, I think people will never like be able to complain that, you know what, I don't have a space, I can't plant, or, you know, I don't have money to buy fertilizers. I think if one would really follow this tradition, I think everybody would have a thriving small Anyana food garden.
Thank you to all of our speakers. And of course, this information and everything will be able on Food from Mzansi's YouTube channel. And we'll also be putting out an article on this topic, another additional article to the one that we already have on www.foodfromzansi.co.za. I see that my former co-host is back, Guguletu. I was just wrapping up and also just thanking our speakers for joining us tonight.
Please do share on intercropping, because I think this is such an interesting topic, and thank you so much to the speakers for giving us so much insight. We really appreciated it.
Thanks to you, my fabulous farmer co-host. Always awesome to have you with us here. And thanks to everyone for tuning in from across Africa. And also be sure to check out foodforafrica.com, and a reminder to please slide into our DMs, because we'd love to tell your stories. Thank you so much. That wraps up the Gather to Grow year with Food for Mzansi. Everything of the best, and enjoy the rest of your evening, and happy intercropping.
Thank you, Dawn. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.